The Prime Minister, in fact, is in the town of Ballon, which is northwest of Melbourne. Let's take a little listen to what she's got to say. She's been launching a new rail link.
On the economy. Oh, look, I don't want to get into an argument with Ted about carbon pricing right now.
We'll arm wrestle.
I'd probably prefer to say I am no longer quite understanding Mr Abbott's analogies in all of this. He used to say carbon pricing would be a wrecking ball across the economy, then somehow a cobra got into the act and now there's a python. It's not clear to me whether the python's eaten the wrecking ball and whether it's fighting with the cobra, but I think all of these tortured analogies are telling you that the claims that have been made by the opposition about carbon pricing are reckless and wrong and will be proved to be reckless and wrong on the 1st of July.
Prime Minister, yesterday the People's Bank of China cut interest rates for the first time since 2008. What will this do to the Australian economy?
Well, the Chinese economy growth rates have moderated, that's certainly true, but when we're talking about moderation in Chinese growth rates, we're talking about, you know, from a very, very high growth rate to still a very high growth rate. So the Chinese economy is going to continue to grow and grow strongly, relatively strongly. In terms of our resources exports, what we have in our nation is fueling urbanisation in China. China is continuing to lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and it is continuing to have hundreds of millions of people move from being farm dwellers or dwellers in villages into dwellers in big cities. That urbanisation means that they have a voracious appetite for the resources that we have to sell. That's good news for Australia. You saw that reflected in the national accounts figures this week, with the Australian economy continuing to grow, indeed returning to the sorts of growth rates we saw before the GFC. But an important thing from those growth figures was it's not just mining that is contributing to the strength of our economy now. And as I said during the week, this is a tremendous shared achievement for the Australian people. When you can look around the world and literally see suburbs and towns that are wastelands where people don't get to work anymore because there are no jobs and people are losing their homes, and then you look at the strength of the Australian economy, it's a truly remarkable thing that we've done together.
Prime Minister, are you happy with the AFP's attempts to prosecute Captain Emad, and do you think that the opposition are arguing that the temporary protection visas still would have enabled him to be caught quicker? Do you agree that there are some holes in that?
The Commissioner, Federal Police Commissioner Tony Negus dealt with this comprehensively yesterday. What was involved was a series of operational judgment calls, and they are for the Federal Police to make.
Are you happy with the work they've done so far?
Look, they make operational judgment calls, and Commissioner Negus addressed them in detail yesterday.
Have there been failings in their work?
Look, I'm not going to comment on operational judgment calls made by police as they go about their work.
Could temporary protection visas have prevented this from?
Well, the evidence on temporary protection visas was that it didn't work to address people smuggling issues. There was some evidence that it was encouraging women and children onto boats because they were seeking to reunite with a family member. And I don't think any of us want to see women and children taking those kind of risks. We know all too tragically where that can end, because we've seen hundreds of asylum seekers drown trying to make the journey to Australia. I think the best way of addressing this scourge of people smuggling is the arrangement that we've struck with Malaysia, but because of the negativity of the opposition, we're not in a position to put it in place.
Do you think it's now time for the world to perhaps consider a military intervention in Syria?
Look, we continue to be appalled by the violence in Syria, absolutely, and I think people around the country would have been moved by some of the images we've seen of the loss of life, including the loss of life of children. We've seen very, very graphic images of that. We continue to support the Annan plan, This is a very difficult situation, and we'll continue to work with the rest of the world to put pressure on Syria to cease the kind of violence that we've seen against the people of Syria.
Do Russia and China need to step up that pressure?
Look, we've addressed these issues fairly comprehensively as this dreadful situation has unfolded. The whole world has to play its part in addressing this situation and bringing all possible pressure to bear to see this violence come to an end.
And just on the Growth Institute report, finally, they're calling for the retirement age to be lifted to 70 and for the GST to be expanded to include health and education. Do you support that? Do you think it's a good idea?
No, I don't. I don't support lifting the rate of the GST, and we have made decisions about the retirement age, and we are not revisiting those decisions. The aim of the Grattan Institute report is to talk about workforce participation, and particularly seems to me from today's reports to focus on workforce participation for women. One of the big steps we've taken to facilitate workforce participation is lifting the tax-free threshold on the 1st of July. It will be tripled. That will mean 1 million people will no longer be in the tax system. 500,000 will go from paying tax to paying no tax. It completely changes the equation for benefits of returning to work after you've had a child. Many women go back to work part-time, and this will be a huge tax benefit to women returning to work part-time. And of course, we're continuing to strongly support our childcare system with record investments, and I'm working with the childcare community, parents and providers and the relevant unions to see what else we can do to assist families with childcare.
Anything else you want to cover? I think we've just about done the international regional rail link here.
Right, we have.
That's the Prime Minister Julia Gillard standing alongside the Victorian Premier Ted Ballieu, traversing a range of subjects there, as hinted there by Ted Ballieu, the situation in Syria, people smuggling, Australia's growth prospects, although I do await with interest the outcome of that proposed arm wrestle by Ted Ballieu to settle the differences over the carbon tax.
Just on size, I think he might have the upper hand.
Ooh,
well, you never know. You think she could be
the Prime Minister. I think she can be pretty tough.
She was, in fact, in regional Victoria launching a new rail link, so that's exciting news for that part of the world as well.